relationship counselor Elizabeth Overstreet. Everyone has this vision in their mind of what marriage is, how romantic they want it to be, how they're going to raise their children, what the core values are going to be in that relationship. But often we don't tell each other totally what that vision is.
Welcome back to another episode of Bed Talks. We're talking about communication. I think we've brought in the right person. We're welcoming to the show a psychologist. Welcome to the show, Amber. We are so happy to have you here tonight.
Yeah, thanks. I'm very excited to be here with you today.
All right, Amber, let's get into it. Can you tell people a little bit about what you do and where you're from, where you practice?
Yeah, so I'm a couples therapist in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I have my own practice, Amber Relationship Psychology. This was like a playoff of my name, which has actually been confusing. So my name is Amber, but my practice is Ember. Like you're stoking an ember, but now everyone calls me like Ember, and I'm like, oh, but whatever, it's fine.
So we were talking, and when I noticed you on Instagram, where I find a lot of my great guests, by the way, I really appreciate people who put work into the content they put out, and that you can tell they're really educating and informing, and you're very good at that. So I was curious, when couples come to you, why is communication so doggone hard? Like you're dating someone, you're with them for a year or two, you say you go to a committed relationship. I'm not talking about us, baby. And then you
too late.
You take it to the next level, and then it's like, hey, I can't communicate with this person. What happens with couples in that period where it seems like they were communicating and then it starts to falter?
Well, I mean, a few things. Usually we enter relationships on our best behavior. You don't go in thinking, oh, I'm going to show them this uglier side of me. We reserve that for a little later often. But we go into partnerships on good behavior. We tend to go out on dates and date people with the hope this is going to work. Maybe they're going to be the one, or whatever that notion is, right? So we generally go in on good behavior, and then we're helped out. So if you are so lucky as to have chemistry with that person that you're with, you're going to have an increase in dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter that's going to make you feel good. So if you feel good, you're going to, nicer things are going to come out of your mouth, and you're going to overlook maybe some of the things that they say that are less great. You're going to have an increase in oxytocin, which is like a bonding hormone. It's going to make you feel lovey and connected with each other. So because we have these neurochemicals working with us, we're less likely to have conflict in the early time when this is part of our neurobiology. Now, eventually, that nice phase, we can call this a limerence phase or the new love phase, it comes to an end, and we're no longer helped out by that neurochemical cocktail. So then you're kind of left with yourself, and you don't have that feel good. When your partner says that thing that kind of bothered you, you don't have that kind of feel good hormone going on in your brain that's helping you see that through a positive lens. You're left with a different lens, and it's harder to respond in a favorable way or to see it in a favorable way. And then you're kind of left with probably some of your conditioning from your early life, things you've been taught in the media or in movies, and you're left with dealing with your emotions. When you have those, first few fights, those disagreements, those hard times, you're left to deal with them, and that can be hard.
Pretty much implies is, in the dating phase, as you stated, everyone is putting their best foot forward, then dopamines, everything is just the chemical content is through the roof, and you leave, your socks on the floor. She comes by while you're watching the game. It's so silly. Don't leave your socks here. She kisses you on the cheek and says, I'm going to put these in the dirty clothes hamper. Oh, it's great. A year, 2 years later, get these socks up. The whole attitude changes. This place is a mess, and that's the analogy that I always use based on what you're saying.
So when you get to that part, once that honeymoon phase has worn off, and say now you're starting to see things a little more clearer, not through rose-colored glasses as much. So how do you coach couples through that process of restoring communication, where maybe I'm gonna use an example where they've tried to communicate many times, but it just they go into the same pattern, or they just hit that roadblock and they just can't get over that roadblock?
Well, let's use your sock analogy. So let's imagine, you've had the same fight about the sock. It started out that lovely kiss. Oh, I feel this way for you. But 3 years later, it's about you're disrespecting me. You don't care about me or my time. I'm not valued. The partner's like, I don't know you anymore. I'm feeling disrespected in how you're speaking to me. I'm so confused. So what starts to happen? We have these strong emotions, and we start to dig in our heels. We get rigid in our positions. So one of you is like, who cares that the sock is on the floor? Like, it's a sock. The rest of the room is generally clean. And the other one is like, no, this means I'm disrespected. This is unfair. Don't you see all the other things that are undone? And you get more rigid in your positions. You don't hear each other anymore. You go over the same argument again and again. This is what research from the Gottmans calls a gridlock perpetual problem. So in relationships, we have what are called solvable problems. That's only 31% of relationship problems. Perpetual problems are 69% of your problems. So you have different beliefs and values. What couples don't realize, or maybe we intellectually know, but it's hard to wrap our head around, is that you're both right. Like this it does have a place, and it's probably okay if it's on the floor, but how are you going to deal with it as a team? And because usually in this debate, we've started to do things like criticize, maybe we've started talking down to our partner, maybe we're being defensive, or we've started to emotionally disengage, well, then we fight about it. So what we're doing is we're fighting about it. We're fighting about the sock. What we need to transition that to is talking about it. Dialogue. I know that doesn't sound like a huge win, but it is. Because when you're fighting, no, it should be there, and you don't appreciate me, and I'm not cared about, and everything has a place, and you're getting all mad, that's not talking. That's blaming. That's accusation. That's talking down to. Now, what we need to be able to do is say and talk about, when I was a kid, everything had a place. When I say something out of place, I feel hurt and I feel underappreciated, because that's what it was like when I was growing up. And I don't know, my impulse is to want to yell when I see them there, because that's the treatment I got. And to share about what that means to you, and then allow your partner to share what it means to them. Well, to me, I'm confused. Socks were everywhere. I didn't know it was such a big deal. And I feel hurt and flooded with emotion when I see you yell about the sock. And we have to talk about what this means. Staying away from that blame, staying away from that accusation. Then you come to some sort of understanding. And sometimes that's enough, because what couples have to come to is tolerating, accepting that your partner just has a different way. And then sometimes after you've heard each other, you can compromise on a bit of the problem. Now, so we have solvable problems, like I like to squeeze the toothpaste from the middle of the tube, and my husband likes to squeeze it from the end of the tube. We're never going to agree, buy 2 toothpastes. Problem solved, okay? Solvable problem. Then maybe we're never going to agree on cleanliness standards for the house. Most couples have a few things you're never going to agree on. You're never going to see it eye to eye. It's not going to be perfectly solved. And the antidote is when they come up as a trigger, when they come up as a problem, to be able to talk about it, have a dialogue about it, express your needs, your feelings, both be heard by each other. Maybe that's all you do. You just hear it and you're like, oh yes, here's our difference again. Okay. And then maybe sometimes you solve part of the problem, knowing the larger issue is still going to exist. Yeah. With couples, they tend to wait on average 6 years before getting couples therapy. So they've had their problem for 6 years before getting some help. When a problem is that dug in, and so I just encourage people to remember, like often people say it's not that bad and that's why we don't want to go. That is like a great time to go. I love working with couples when it's not that bad. I'm like, okay, so things aren't that bad. That is great. Let's solve these. You can do 4, 8, 16 sessions. We can probably really help you out.
And everything for the most part is fine. But you just say, we just want to do some preventative maintenance. It's nothing major. We just want to go see Amber and we're going to talk through these things. But in actuality, maybe some of those issues are now expounded or compound that can cause more issues, because I know with counseling or therapy, the purpose is to try to overturn, every stone so that we can address those stones. I say that in a comical way, but truth be told, that can happen because I know, like, even with your own, wife or husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, that it could be something that's minor that you guys just may decide to talk about. But in the process, it can actually, amplify, and I'm not knocking any therapist, but there are some, it's like doctors, you go in for, I don't know, a cough and, they say, well, actually, I noticed something else. You have a rash, under your forearm. Yeah. It's like, look, I just came in for the cough, I want to focus on that right now. So I hear what you're saying. It really depends on the couples as well as on the therapist.
Yeah. And also, like, sometimes people are coming, they're like, oh, I have a small problem. My partner, like, doesn't talk to me very nicely. We just want to tweak that. And then they're like, we get into talking. They're like, oh, and there's an addiction. And also we've both been unfaithful. And we have a secret child that we just found out about. And we're worried about this small little problem of how we're talking to each other. And I'm like, oh, that's not a small problem, because that is the symptom of all these other things. So in that case, we would unturn many stones, because there's lots of things that are influencing how people are speaking to each other. But truly, there's people that come in and they're like, yeah, we've just been having the same fight. We can't work through it. Can you help us? Literally, that's their only problem, or they They're not sure about something, they want to work that through, or there's been some crisis or something, or some hurt feeling, or we can work through it and then it's done.
When you go to a therapist, sometimes it's like dating. It's not a good fit. Like
Yeah.
you have to really lean in, and you should feel comfortable being yourself, bringing your authentic self, being able to reveal things, and you should be getting some results, right? And if you're not feeling like you're going to get those results, or those results aren't happening, so maybe they didn't take action. Because the other piece I will say, as someone who coaches people, is you can give people all the direction, the tools, and some of the answers. We don't know everything. We're imperfect too, but we know many things because we're really bringing people cumulative knowledge of all the people we're talking to, all the experiences we have personally, as well as the experiences of the people we're talking to. So we kind of know after a while what works, what doesn't work, but people have to do the work as well. And sometimes the most disappointing part, that you can lead the camel to the water, but the camel doesn't have to drink the water. So people have to, at a certain point, have that self-accountability to be willing to lean in and try something different, especially if what they've been doing is not working. So I think it's a partnership. It's twofold.
Yeah.
It's not just on one person. Thank you so much for coming on. Why don't you tell people how they can find you, and if there's any new projects you're working on that you want to make people aware of, you can talk about that too.
Yeah, so as you heard, my practice is Amber Relationship Psychology, but my name is Amber with an A, Amber with an E, where you can find access to most of my resources on my website, so www.amberrelationshipsychology.com. One of the best things I have on there, while I have podcast, blog, therapy services, information, everything, I have a number of free guides and free resources, so go check those out. And then if you want to learn more about me, I'm most active on my Instagram, so my handle is at Amber Relationship Psychology, but www.amberrelationshipsychology will give you access to whether it's my podcast, free guides, Instagram. That would be the kind of hub where you could find it, and I can share those links with you guys if you want.
All right, that would be awesome. So thank you again for coming on the show. She was great, right? We enjoyed this.
Thank you, Miss Amber.
Yes.
You're very welcome. This is super fun.
Yes, we enjoyed you so much. So you guys, thank you for tuning in to this show. We hope you will walk away with some techniques for communication. Remember, get help sooner than later. And remember, we want to dialogue, not keep fighting. Amber, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Until next time, XOXO.